Tonight is not random, and if you found this video, it means your field is already being pressured. Because the Archon harvest doesn't begin when you feel fear. It begins when you start waking up and they realize you're no longer a passive source of energy. You're becoming conscious, and conscious humans are the one thing they can't fully control, which is why the oldest texts that were hidden, burned, translated into harmless metaphors, and stripped from public teaching all point to the same uncomfortable truth. Jesus didn't only teach morals, he taught protection, and he didn't teach protection as superstition, he taught it as a precise, repeatable technology that anchors a higher frequency into matter. Because the harvest system relies on one advantage above all else, it relies on you being unprotected, unfocused, and unaware of what's attaching to you, feeding from you, and steering your emotions while you blame yourself for it. And the reason the church systems could never allow certain teachings to spread is simple, because a protected person cannot be managed through fear. And a person who can block interference stops needing intermediaries, stops needing permission, stops needing someone else to tell them they are worthy of contact with the divine. And tonight you're going to learn 3 sacred objects that block Archon harvest, not in theory, not as a ritual that might help, but as a direct system you can test immediately. And you will not need a priest, you will not need an expensive altar. You will not need years of training, you will need one object, carried with intention, used with understanding, and chosen based on what kind of interference you're experiencing right now. Because Archon harvesting comes in patterns, and each pattern has a counter frequency, and the objects I'm about to share are not random spiritual trinkets, they are frequency anchors. Physical carriers that hold a stable signal in the material world, and anything operating below that signal cannot remain coherent around you. It cannot attach, it cannot feed, and it cannot maintain the fog that keeps you doubting your own perception. Because most people distant heaven distant heaven, and heaven beg for, like a phi, like a system stays alive, reality doesn't respond to begging, and the first respond to begging, it respond to begging. A reality doesn't respond to begging, it respond to begging, it respond to begging, it respond to begging, and they constantly remind your body what state to stabilize into, or nervous through endless emotional agitation, because your home, your clothing, your pockets, the items you touch daily, they are not neutral, they hold patterns, they store resonance, and they constantly remind your body what state to stabilize into, which is why Archons work through environments, through media, through noise. So here's what you're going to do. As you watch this, you're going to listen for the one object that matches your current symptoms, because you don't need all 3 tonight, you need one, and you need to use it correctly. If your main problem is that you feel watched, drained, restless at night, like something is around, like your space doesn't feel like your own sanctuary anymore, then your countermeasure is going to be an object that stabilizes the atmosphere around you. If your main problem is mental fog, confusion, second-guessing, intrusive thoughts, sudden emotional drops that don't feel like you, then your countermeasure is going to be an object that locks your identity into a signal they can't spoof. And if the first sacred object is the one for chosen ones who feel like their perception has been dampened, like the world has more layers but you can't access them clearly, like you're always one step away from the truth, but never quite touching it. And the Archons love this state because a blind person can be led anywhere. The object is lapis lazuli, and I'm not talking about any random blue crystal trend. I'm talking about a mineral that appears across ancient civilizations, across the oldest mystery traditions, across cultures that never met each other, yet they all treated this stone as a heavenly technology, not a decoration, and the reason is simple. Certain minerals carry stable. Lapis lazuli works as an anchor for perception because it supports coherence in the 2 centers. Archons target most aggressively the third eye and the crown, because those are the gates of higher perception. Those are the interfaces that allow you to perceive patterns beyond the 5 senses, and if those interfaces are dulled, you become manageable. You become easily gaslit by your own mind. You become someone who feels crazy whenever you sense something real, and once you start distrusting yourself, you become the perfect harvest field. What lapis does, when carried consistently, is it becomes a reference tone, like a tuning fork. This is stincy, training, and then D, and training, and training, and training, and training, and the TA. You do not need a Prophet stone that you keep on your body, and you not need a perfect pendant. You need a genuine lapis stone that you keep on your body, in your pocket, near your throat, over your chest, or even simply in your hand during quiet time, and you need to carry it daily for at least 7 days to feel the first clear shift, and as the days pass you will start to notice specific changes that chosen ones report again and again. You will notice your dreams becoming vivid, coherent, almost instructional, because the dream space is where interference often hides, and when your subconscious message. And that is why Archons fear this object, because Archons do not win through strength, they win through invisibility, they win through your ignorance, they win through plausible deniability, through you assuming every thought is yours, every fear is yours, every impulse is yours, and the moment your perception sharpens, you start catching the foreign signal, you start recognizing the difference between your authentic voice and an implanted thought form, and once you can recognize it, you can reject it without drama, without fear, without feeding it, because conscious observation breaks their mechanism, and when their mechanism breaks, they cannot harvest. So if you are a chosen one who feels blocked, who feels spiritually blind, who knows there is more but can't access it consistently, then tonight you carry lapis lazuli, not as fashion, as training, and you carry it with one decision in your mind: I will not be dulled, because intention matters, not as wishful thinking, but as direction for your nervous system, and your nervous system is the gateway for your frequency. Now the second sacred object is for the chosen ones whose biggest battle is mental fog. Confusion, second-guessing, intrusive thoughts, constant loops, the kind of inner noise that makes you feel like you can't land on a decision, like you can't hear your own truth, like every time you get clarity something pulls you back into doubt. And this is one of the most common forms of Archon harvest, because confusion is profitable. A confused person is easier to steer, easier to keep in cycles, easier to keep consuming distractions, easier to keep afraid of their own power. And the countermeasure here is not a stone, it is not a candle. The phrase you will write tonight is, I am sovereign, and you will write it exactly like that. 3 simple words, because 3 words form a stable triad, and stability is what breaks the fog. Sovereignty is the one frequency. Archons cannot manipulate because the harvest system depends on consent, even if that consent is unconscious, even if it is given through fear, through shame, through addiction to suffering. Through the belief that you are powerless, they need you to accept the story they're broadcasting. And I am sovereign is not an affirmation meant to make you feel better. It is a legal declaration in spiritual dimensions. Here is exactly how you do it. And do not rush this, because rushing is the old pattern. Tonight you will take a clean piece of paper, something blank, something that has not been used for random notes, because you want an uncluttered carrier, and you will use ink, not pencil, because pencil is erasable and erasure is symbolic of uncertainty, and you will write slowly in your own handwriting, I am sovereign D, and as you write you will not hope, you will declare. And if your mind argues, let it argue, but keep writing, because the arguing mind is often the fog itself trying to prevent the anchor from being created. After you write it, you will fold the paper 3 times, not because folding is superstition, but because folding is sealing. It is compressing the signal. It is creating a contained carrier that stays on your body, and then you will carry it in your wallet, in your pocket, in a small pouch, anywhere it stays with you, and you will carry it for 7 days minimum, and what you will notice is not mystical fireworks. You will notice something more valuable. You will notice the mental noise lowering. You will notice your decisions becoming easier. You will notice that the fog that used to appear when you tried to focus suddenly cannot hold, because the moment the fog tries to generate itself, this object is feared because spoken words fade. You say them, and they dissolve into the air. But written words persist. They hold. They remain. They broadcast continuously. And that continuous broadcast changes your baseline. And when your baseline changes, you stop being compatible with the harvest frequency. You become energetically expensive to target, because to harvest you, they would need to reintroduce confusion constantly. And confusion cannot stabilize in the presence of anchored sovereignty. So they move to easier targets. And you will notice something else that is extremely common when the fog breaks. You will notice the attack through people. So if your problem is confusion, intrusive thoughts, mental loops, constant doubt, carry the written seal tonight and do not treat it like a charm. Treat it like a broadcast. Treat it like a boundary that your own body can finally respect. Because many chosen ones are not attacked because they are weak. They are attacked because they never stabilize their boundaries into a pattern their subconscious can obey, and writing creates pattern. Now, the third sacred object is the one for chosen ones whose space feels heavy, whose sleep is disturbed, who feel like something watches, who feel like their home is not fully theirs. Because the harvest doesn't only happen inside your mind, it happens inside environments. Because environments hold emotional residue, they hold repeated patterns, and archons cluster around density, around anger, around despair, around unresolved grief, and they particularly love nighttime because that's when most humans drop their conscious defenses and become easy to siphon. And the object that blocks this type of harvest is pure beeswax candle, used as a frequency. Here is how to use it, and it must be simple. Because complicated rituals often become another form of distraction. Tonight, before you sleep, you will light a beeswax candle for 7 minutes, not hours, 7 minutes. Because you are not doing a ceremony, you are establishing a signal. And while it burns, you will sit near it and you will not scroll, you will not consume content. You will not think about your problems, you will simply hold one awareness: this space is sovereign. Because the candle is not doing the work alone, it is amplifying your declaration into the room. It is giving your nervous system a focal point to stabilize. And when your nervous system stabilizes, your field stabilizes. And when your field stabilizes, the environment becomes inhospitable to entities that rely on chaos. Then you will extinguish it with respect, not by blowing it out aggressively in a scattered state, but by gently putting it out. Because the end matters, the end locks the pattern, and then you will go to sleep. And what many chosen ones notice within the first 3 nights is not just better sleep, but a shift in the atmosphere, a sense that the room feels lighter, a sense that the corners feel less thick, a sense that the feeling of being watched diminishes. And if you wake in the night, you will notice your mind is less likely to spiral into fear. Because fear is one of the easiest feeding channels, and when fear is absent, the entities that thrive on it lose their foothold. Archons fear stable light not because light is holy, in a childish way, but because the harvest system relies on low coherent states, and coherent environments reduce emotional spikes, reduce nightmares, reduce subconscious turbulence, and subconscious turbulence is how they access you. Because most harvesting happens when you are unconscious, not because you are weak, but because you are open, and openness without sovereignty becomes vulnerability, and beeswax flame combined with intention is a fast way to re-establish sovereignty in a space. Now you might be thinking, why 3 objects? Why not one universal tool? And the answer is, because harvesting has layers. There is perception harvesting, where they keep you blind. There is identity harvesting, where they keep you confused. And there is environmental harvesting, where they keep your space unstable. And Jesus taught chosen ones to work with matter, because matter is where the prison operates. And if you keep trying to fight a material interference system with only invisible prayers, you may feel comforted, but you often won't see results. Because comfort without coherence is not protection, and the reason these teachings were hidden is because they are too direct. So tonight, choose one and choose it based on your symptoms, and do not overthink it, because overthinking is sometimes the fog itself. If you feel blocked and dulled, carry lapis lazuli for 7 days and watch your perception clarify. If you feel confused and mentally attacked, write, I am sovereign. Fold it 3 times, carry it on your body, and watch the fog dissolve. If your space feels heavy and your nights feel harvested, light a beeswax candle for 7 minutes before sleep and declare the room sovereign and watch the atmosphere shift. You can use more than one later, but tonight you start with one because momentum matters and a single consistent. And now I'm going to tell you the most important part. The part that separates people who get results from people who collect spiritual information endlessly while staying in the same cycles. Do not treat this like content. Treat it like a command to your nervous system. because Archons don't fear your knowledge, they fear your embodiment, they fear when you actually do the thing. Because when you actually do the thing, you create evidence, and evidence breaks the last chain, which is doubt. And doubt is one of the strongest control mechanisms, because doubt keeps you from taking action. So tonight, do not wait for a perfect moment. Do not wait for perfect supplies. Do not wait until you feel ready. Because readiness is often just your mind trying to delay the activation. Choose one object and use it tonight, and then observe the next 24 hours with honesty. Because you will notice something. It may be subtle at first, but subtle shifts are how sovereignty begins. You may notice that your mind is quieter. You may notice that your emotions feel more yours. You may notice that you're less reactive. You may notice that sleep becomes deeper, and these are not small things. These are the first cracks in the harvest system. And once the cracks appear, if you want the quickest test, here it is. Tonight, after you choose and use your object, pay attention to the quality of your internal dialogue, because harvested minds have a specific signature. Harvested minds are loud, urgent, fearful, looping, and sovereign minds are quieter, clearer, and more decisive, not because life is suddenly easy, but because the interference layer is reduced. And when that interference layer is reduced, your own intelligence returns, and your own intelligence is what was always meant to guide you. And understand this as well. The goal is not to live in fear of Archons. The goal is to become so coherent that they cannot access you. Because fear itself is one of their main food sources. And if you watch content like this and become paranoid, you accidentally feed the very system you're trying to escape. The correct response is calm authority, calm execution, calm observation, and that calm is not weakness. It is the signature of a system that is no longer being hijacked. Because hijacked systems are always frantic, always reactive, always seeking external reassurance, and sovereign systems are stable and self-led. If you are a chosen one, you already know there are moments in your life where you felt something unseen was pressuring you, where you felt like you were fighting battles you couldn't explain, where you felt like your energy was being siphoned and you couldn't prove it to anyone. And that is exactly why teachings like this matter, not because they replace faith, but because they restore the missing component of faith, which is power, not power over others. Power over your own field, and the moment you gain power over your own field, you stop leaking, and when you stop leaking, you stop being profitable to parasites, whether those parasites are energetic entities. So here is your final instruction, and I want you to treat it like a direct assignment tonight. Choose one object, use it correctly, and then tomorrow notice what changed. And if you want to accelerate the shift, do it for 7 days straight without skipping. Because consistency is what locks in a new baseline. If you skip, you return to the old baseline and you confuse your nervous system. And nervous system confusion is one of the easiest openings for interference. If you stay consistent, you teach your system a new normal, and once your system has a new normal, protection becomes effortless because you're not fighting. You were never meant to live drained, fogged, and harvested. You were meant to live clear, stable, and sovereign, and that is why you are here. That is why you're watching. Because something in you is tired of the extraction and ready to test what is real. And the most dangerous thing you can do to a harvesting system is stop being theoretical and become experimental. Because experiments produce results, and results destroy illusions. Do it tonight, and if you feel the shift, if you notice the fog thinning, if you notice your space lightening, if you notice your perception sharpening, then you'll understand why these teachings were hidden. Because a chosen one who can block harvesting is no longer manageable, and a population of chosen ones who can block harvesting is the end of the system. If you carried one of these objects tonight, I want you to comment one sentence under your video when you publish it, not as superstition but as declaration. I carry sovereignty, because declarations are not for the algorithm. Declarations are for your nervous system. Declarations tell your subconscious that the decision is final, and when the subconscious accepts the decision, your entire field reorganizes around it. And once your field reorganizes, the harvesting stops not gradually, but suddenly, because what was feeding on you was never stronger than you. It was simply feeding on your unconsciousness, and the moment you become conscious,